1. About 10 years ago, I worked for a famous wholesale club that usually prides itself on good working conditions and treating their employees well. You know the one. The specific location I worked for happened to be a rather large exception to that rule, as it would turn out. I worked in the suburbs west of Detroit for this wholesale club in the deli department for the better part of 2 years. My job was, among other things, skewering the chickens, preparing entrees, and performing the nightly cleaning procedures. If you know anything about this wholesale club, you know that they have very detailed and very thorough procedures for just about everything, because they care about their customers and they care about doing the right thing in general, even when no one is looking. Or so I thought. During the 2 years, I started noticing certain patterns that felt not just unfair but possibly dangerous or hazardous to the well-being of employees and or customers. A couple of examples, among dozens of others: we were being told to look past off-colored or bad-smelling raw rotisserie chickens and to just do my job, being written up for clocking out 1 minute over my shift, even though I was rushing to complete all of the sanitation tasks in the prep area, and getting in trouble, written up, for requesting the wholesale club's company policy and deli guidelines about how fast a satisfactory employee should be expected to go when preparing entrees and cleaning the deli. My manager bucked the official guidelines and would always make me perform 10% faster than my previous week's performance. Probably so she could cut more hours and send us part-timers home sooner, so it'd cut down on the expenditures and she'd look good. Given my place in life, I had absolutely needed this job and couldn't afford to lose it. So I tolerated everything that I felt was odd or perhaps egregiously unfair about the work environment. But I wrote everything down in a journal when I came across an instance where I thought, that doesn't seem like the executives of this company would approve of that. But now, at the point where I had another job offer, I felt slightly more confident and less likely to slip into my subservient, spineless worker facade. About 2 or 3 days after I had tendered my 2-week notice, one of the lead people of the store called me to the main office while I was working in the deli. I walked up to see what they wanted. I was given a packet of paperwork that was tantamount to an exit interview. It had questions many of us have all seen before in an exit interview. It also had a space for extra comments. In this space, I put that I had some concerns about some of the safety practices, disciplinary measures, adherence to corporate standards, and general demeanor of the worker morale within the deli department. That's all I put. I didn't get salty. I didn't list examples. I wasn't even mad. I was just a naive younger adult in my early 20s who thought some companies really cared about certain kinds of feedback regarding well-being and safety of the employees and customers. I handed in the paperwork and returned to my department. About 2 days later, I get called to the main office again. Oh boy, maybe they want to hear my feedback and concerns, I thought. When I arrived into the office, the same lead person who originally handed me the paperwork had a puzzled expression on her face. She told me to step into this super tiny office, where they had the security camera monitors stored. Inside was a small desk and 3 store leaders, the assistant manager, the store manager, and this lady. They all told me to take a seat and shut the door of this super tiny room. All 3 of them got really close to me from across the tiny table. The store manager was first to speak. "Farts don't matter. How many years of experience do I have being a manager?" "Probably a lot. Seems like you know how to run the store." "Right. I've been here," they point to their name tag, "since some year in the late 90s. So would you say that I have what it takes to know how to reflect on all of the things needed to operate a wholesale club like this?" "Yeah, likely that you do. What are you getting at?" "How many years of management experience do you have, Mr. Farts Don't Matter?" "None." "Okay, how many years of deli management experience do you have?" "None. I work as an associate." "Right, so let me ask you, how do you know how to run a deli if you don't have any experience as a deli manager?" "Never said I did know how." "Well, apparently you think you do, because I have what looks like very disgruntled paperwork here I believe you filled out that says you have some concerns about certain safety practices, disciplinary measures, adherence to corporate standards." "That's right." "How can you know what is truly a concern in the deli department if you've never had experience as a deli manager?
You just told me you have no experience as a deli manager.
I don't answer.
The reason we called you in here today,
everyone in the room folds their arms in unison,
is because we know you overthink stuff. We don't pay you to think, we pay you to show up and work. And while you may think your comments and so-called concerns are legitimate, I can assure you that your remarks instead come across as disgruntled and highly out of line. It would be a shame if a future employer called us for a reference check and we had to tell them Mr. Farts Don't Matter was a highly disgruntled employee. Therefore, we're going to give you this opportunity to rewrite your paperwork, and we will pretend like we didn't even see this paperwork, so you can rest assured we don't have to mention anything about you being disgruntled to any future employer.
One of the other people slides me a fresh copy of the same paperwork. I agree to rewrite it. They leave me alone while I begin to rewrite the paperwork. When I get to the comments section, I write, "Everything was absolutely perfect about my experience, and there is nothing but good things I have to say." And this was what the 3 managers told me to put after bringing me into a tiny room and giving me the opportunity, an offer I couldn't refuse, to rewrite this paperwork after my former paperwork, which pointed out that I had concerns about the deli department, would be interpreted like I am a disgruntled employee if I submitted that copy of the paperwork. I turned in my new paperwork without saying anything and walked back to my department. I didn't return to work after that night. The fallout? Came back for a shop a few weeks later after starting my new job, and the store had an entirely different management, and the deli manager was long gone. 2. So this story takes place in a fancy bar in Copenhagen, where I worked part-time as a runner and semi-bartender in the weekends. This bar is a very popular place for older, more wealthy people who want to go out, have dinner, get drunk, and have a rowdy evening. This meant that we got a lot of "don't you know who I am" stereotypes, with too much cash, time, and attitude for anyone's good. The situation kicks off with me serving drinks to a small group of young women. I'm sitting by their table, chatting, trying to be funny, and simultaneously take their orders. The place encouraged us to take time and chat with people. Then, out of nowhere, this guy, Chad, comes along. He pulls a chair over beside me and leans across the table, effectively blocking me from talking to the woman at the table. Oddly, a semi-defensive statement, I thought, but no big deal. I'm just here to catch the order and banter a bit. As I move to get up, Chad places a hand on my shoulder, pushing me back down, and gives me that "these girls are mine" look. I found out later they didn't know him at all, and says, "Why you?" in a condescending tone Skyrim players will know. Me, not really understanding the situation, tell him I'm just there to get the women some drinks. Wrong move, obviously. Now Chad thinks I'm competition or something. He gives me the once-over and scoffs. Full-on, "you filthy peasant" scoff. It was a rather impressive sound, in all honesty, and says, "You look too young to be here. I don't think you can even afford drinks for everyone." I was 19 at the time, and as I said, mostly older people went to that bar. At this point, I realize he doesn't know I work there. No, this is a PettyRevenge, and not an "I don't work here" lady, I promise. But I don't tell him that, as I really should be going back to work, and don't want to deal with his attitude any longer than absolutely necessary. So I just look at him, say something like, "Yeah, sure." Get up and leave to go get the drinks, 5 espresso martinis. While I'm gone, I notice Chad has taken a seat and proceeds to dominate the conversation at the table. You know, that type of conversation where a drunk dude is asking the girls superficial questions, in turn, and none of them really want to give a response, so they just sort of look at each other and sip their almost empty drinks. I apply an overly engaged and slightly too loud voice, "So where do you come from? You don't look Danish?" Yeah, that sort of thing. 10 minutes pass, it was a busy evening, and I return with drinks in hand. Chad is still at the table, talking loudly and laughing at his own brilliant jokes. As I approach the table, he notices me and says something like, "Oh, it's you again. Didn't I tell you to go away?" Yeah, a real charmer. I just say, "Nah, you didn't," and try to place the drinks on the table, which was difficult, because martini glasses have an annoying shape when you're carrying several. For some reason, Chad decided my semi-monotone response was some grand insult to his person, so he proceeded to stand up and shove my shoulder in that "get out of here" sort of way. Now, it wasn't a hard push or anything, but juggling 5 espresso martinis, it was enough to get me slightly off balance, and 3 of the drinks slid from my hand, smashing on the table, and went all over one of the poor ladies. At this point, I'd had more than enough of him. I'd literally been in his company for less than 5 minutes combined, and he'd already been condescending, rude, and shoved my shoulder. On to build-up of the revenge. I immediately go to the bouncer, a really nice guy, and tell him that Chad is disrupting my work and needs to leave or something. Bouncer agrees and goes to have a little chat with Chad, who suddenly seems very apologetic. Whatever. I continue with my work and apologize to the poor lady with espresso martini all over her dress. They leave shortly after, but she took it with dignity, and none of them blamed me for the situation. It turned out, the bouncer gave Chad a little lecture about adult behavior, but allowed him to stay since he was spending big bucks. Fair enough, but I stay away from him for the rest of the evening. Time passes, and we close up shop. I'm clearing tables out front when I notice Chad is taking up unwanted residence at another table with young women, laughing and still talking too loudly. I approach the table and tell them it's time to drink up as we're closing. Safe to say, at this point, Chad is pretty pissed drunk and proceeds to go off on a drunken ramble. "This is the one I was telling you about. I don't understand how they can hire such idiots at a place like this. I don't like the look on your face. You should just quit this job, so I don't have to see you again." And so on. I tell him again it's time to leave, and notice the bouncer standing a bit behind me. So does Chad, apparently, because he sighs dramatically and says, "Come on, girls, time to leave!" And they do. Now, this is where the petty little devil inside me perks up. Because, behold a treasure, Chad has been so busy being angry at me, he forgets his phone smack dab in the middle of the table. Revenge time. I pocket his phone, clear the table, and give the phone to one of the bartenders inside, telling him Chad has forgotten it. Policy is after close time, people will have to come back to get their stuff next day. Although we mostly just hand the stuff out if people come knocking. Now, the bouncer has told everyone about Chad's behavior, and I wasn't the only one that he had caused trouble for. We have closed the place, all the customers have left, and we're cleaning up. Important. At this bar, all the half-empty drinks are poured into a big metal tub so that it can be thrown down the industrial drain rather than the normal one. The tub is worse than any witch's cauldron. It's full of slime and sludge, half-melted ice cubes, slices of lime, mint leaves, all manner of leftover alcoholic beverages. It stinks, is brown and sticky, and just plain disgusting. Cue aggressive knocking at the window. Oh look, Chad has come back for his phone. One of the bartenders tells him he'll have to come back tomorrow. A little lesson for all the trouble he's caused. Obviously, Chad, being drunk and angry, goes nuts outside the bar, throwing one of our chairs on the ground and shouting insults at us. We all just laughed, which got him even more angry. That's when Chad decided on the brilliant strategy of staking at the door and waiting until we leave so he could storm in and grab his phone. So he sat on the step in front of the door and repeatedly shouted that he wouldn't leave until he got his phone back. This is when the supervising bartender, but probably the single greatest idea of all time. You see, the bar has 2 stories, and on the second story, one of the windows opens right above the front door. You can probably guess what comes next. The supervising bartender says, "Hey, let's get the tub to the 2nd floor." Yes, that tub. The one filled with brown ooze that stinks worse than liquefied farts and is more sticky than honey. We get the tub up to the 2nd floor, which was hard. I reckon there was at least 30 liters of gross in there. Open the window and unleash a waterfall of pure evil right on top of Chad's overly stylized hair. I swear he looked up as if he heard the window open and managed to get a good measure of the stuff in his mouth. He shot up, arms outstretched in that holy mother of all fucks this shit is cold, or disgusting, position, spitting and gulping, and utterly incapable of comprehending that we had just given him a shower of pure petty revenge. He strutted around for a while, trying to wipe the stuff off, no longer angry, just utterly disgusted and shocked at the turn of events. Also, his fine white dinner shirt was drenched in sticky brown. We laughed about that for months afterward, and I do believe it's still a story staff tell at the place. Aftermath? In short, there wasn't any. Chad was so grossed out he left in the end, and although I worked at the place for a year more, I never saw him again. My God, was it funny to see. Although the revenge was probably over the top, none of us felt too bad about it. 3. About a year ago, I was working at this massive upscale department store as a sales associate in a semi-rural area. After COVID-19 started, they had me split my work between touchpoint cleaning and staying behind the register. This day in April, I'm going around the store and cleaning. I see a familiar face. A customer who provoked and manipulated me into feeling angry so he could turn around and get me fired. I don't want to focus too much on what he did to me because this is a story of how I exacted revenge on this man, but here's the long and short of it. The customer is an anti-masker who came so close into my personal space, which made me nervous about catching disease. I'd also call him a narcissist for the reasons you'll see below. There was a spam offer on our signature pads that promised a 25% discount on an online order. My coworkers and managers would just skip past it. No one else had issues with it except him. He had read it and asked me multiple times what my problem was with him, and that he might have wanted to sign up for it. It wasn't a good day for me, so I was kicking myself when I shouldn't have. I think he knew this and was seizing on it. He claims he's a regular customer. I restart the transaction so he can get his blessed inbox spammed, and he begins to insult me. Calls me incompetent, the R slur, too pathetic to live, weird kid in high school with no friends. Probably projection. Has the ugliest smirk on his face while doing it too. I tell him loudly it's because of the mask situation, so as revenge for pressing a button on the screen, he reports me to my pushover supervisor, who in turn wants to, or has to, bring it up to corporate. Stares at me with a psychotic blank expression and leaves. His stare is so intense that I'm afraid he's gonna run in through the door with his kid in his hand. Yes, he held a little girl in his arms as he did that. She looked absolutely done with life. I have to write up a document and send it to corporate detailing the situation and imply legal action if they don't comply with my demands. Cite the laws around masks and disability. I'm on the spectrum. They back off, but I'm yelled at by the store manager. She's shitting her pants at this point. Honestly, I thought the dude was so angry he'd never come back. I mean, did he think his little ego gratification scheme was actually gonna work? As it turns out, he did. Less than a month later. As the high touchpoint cleaner, I am tasked with going around the store and cleaning surfaces customers and employees touch. It gave me freedom, and I quite liked it. But it also gave me cover for what I did next. From what I remember, he was by the polo looking at clothing, and I know it's him from the back. I look at him straight in his eyes and say, "Hello." In my head, I'm trying to mimic his psychotic stare. But in all honesty, it probably looked like a glare. He turns around and by God, he looks almost afraid that I'm gonna hit him. I didn't want to, not strongly at least. He mutters, "Hi." Well, that's satisfying. But not satisfying enough. I alert my supervisor, the same one who heard his bullshit a month ago, to his presence in the store, and she tells me to get him if I'm helping him and he starts to act foolish again. One of my coworkers needs to go to the bathroom, so I'm at the register. He interrupts me with another customer and asks me whether or not the dressing rooms are open, and his smirk looks noticeably forced. I give a fake customer service line like, "Only that one should be, sir." I'm steeling myself for when I need to help him again, but thankfully, when he comes out, he pivots and walks all the way across the store to be helped by my coworker. It looks my way with a nervous expression. So wait, you can violate my boundaries all you want, but as soon as you're feeling intimidated by me, you need several hundred feet of space. At the time, I'm thinking he turned because he recognized the plainclothes loss prevention folks. If you recognize him as a customer, you're doing something wrong. His pivot actually catches one of their attention, and he's looking at him. I walk up to the LP guy and say he should surveil him because he's bad news. So now his shopping experience is extra uncomfortable. But that isn't enough. Remember what I said about those fingerprints giving me cover? This basically means I could discreetly follow him around and see if he did anything to anyone else. And if he noticed me and retaliated, it would look bad on him. This is essentially what happened. I was at the fragrance counter, watching him, but making out as if I'm just cleaning it as per my normal duties. The exit is to my left. When I look up again, he's at my 10 o'clock in full view of the cameras and my coworker. He walks up the perimeter of the counter behind me. Oh, the adrenaline's pumping full force now. I grab the stapler and unhinge it to clean, thinking it might serve as a weapon if he comes behind the counter and attacks me physically. He's doing what I want, though. As soon as he leaves, I breathe a sigh of relief. He heads out the door, and my manager makes as if he's opening the door for him. But that smile, a genuine smile, not a smirk, quickly fades off his face, as my supervisor pulls him aside and tells our regular customer that he's no longer welcome, and if he comes in again, police will be notified. My supervisor saw everything, and the threat of an impending lawsuit forced his hand. I played this asshole at his own game, and he lost. Maybe now he'll think twice before abusing service workers. 4. This was many years ago when I was trying to break into the jazz scene as a singer in a new city I had moved to. I had shared some recordings of mine with a super talented musician and band leader who lived there, and based on that, he invited me to come out to one of their shows and sit in on a few songs. It was a great opportunity for me to perform in front of an audience of jazz lovers, and also to make music and connect with several really wonderful players. His guidelines were simple: just pick 3 jazz standards that I thought I would shine on, and he and his band would back me up in whatever I chose. I spent the week considering which songs would demonstrate my skill and also carry the most emotional impact, and I practiced them every day. That Friday night I took extra time to try to look good, but I was still pretty nervous and self-conscious when I got to the crowded club. I literally knew nobody in this town. In a stroke of luck, someone left a little 2-seat table just as the band began, and I snagged it. During the break, after the first set, the band leader came over to chat with me. He was a really nice guy and generous with his talents. He didn't need to let me sit in with his band. As a matter of fact, many people wouldn't have done it. I was really grateful to have met him and felt hopeful about the contacts I would make through him. But more importantly, I thought we might end up being friends. He told me that after the break they would play a few songs and then he would invite me up. He then went off to mingle with all the other people who wanted to talk to him. As soon as he got up, a woman slid into the seat he had just vacated. She was tall and pretty, and she said she had heard that the bandleader had invited me to sit in, and that she was also a singer, and she wanted to welcome me to town.
"We chick singers have to stick together,"
she said with a beautiful smile. Could this night get any better? Here I was making another friend already.
"What songs are you going to sing?"
We chatted a bit, and I told her what I had chosen and why. She was really charming. As the band took to the stage, she excused herself to go back to the group of friends she was there with. She flashed that beautiful smile and told me with a wink that she was sure we'd see each other again real soon. The band finished the first song of the second set, and then the band leader called up the other woman that I had just met. It was odd that she hadn't mentioned she was going to sing too, but I was glad I'd get a chance to hear her. I then sat there, utterly shocked and dumbfounded, as she proceeded to sing all 3 of the songs that I had prepared. I looked over and saw her friends looking back and forth between her and me, laughing. I was so stunned, mainly because never in 1,000 years would it occur to me to do something so shitty to another person, let alone a fellow musician. She literally came over to me and acted friendly to find out what songs I was singing so she could pull that stunt. Welcome to your new town. I was so hurt and humiliated. She was, at this point, singing the 3rd song directly to me to get the amusement of her friends. The bandleader knew that something was up, but he had no idea what. As in, I hadn't told him what songs I would do. My brain was racing, trying to come up with a way to deal with the situation, and then it hit me. She was pretty good, but she wasn't that good. She was a little formulaic, a bit unoriginal. She was depending on her looks and presence, her tricks she had learned in her voice lessons. She was technique-heavy and soul-lacking. In other words, she was baffling them with bullshit, and I knew what I had to do. Her last song ended, and she left the stage to generous applause from the audience, and a cheers from her table of friends. The bandleader called me up. I handed him my lead sheets and whispered to him, "She stole my songs. Please trust me on this. Let me do the same songs." Fortunately, he got it instantly, and nodded with a little smile, and I sang the living hell out of those songs. I put every ounce of my training, but also my emotions, my angst, my fears, my longing, my loneliness, my joy. I wasn't even aware of the room, but for a moment between songs, when I glanced out to see her sitting there with her mouth hanging open, and her friends, now sitting still and silent. The room exploded when I finished, and I got a standing ovation. Someone actually shouted out, "That's how you do it!" I honestly felt kind of bad for her, but I think she learned something that night. The bandleader came up to me later and told me that he had wanted to teach her a lesson in humility for a long time, and thanked me for letting him be part of it. I ended up living in that town for 5 years and became good friends with the bandleader and many other musicians in town. I never got close with that other singer, but she never tried to pull something like that with me again, and I think she never tried it with anyone else either. I still think it was one of my best performances ever. 5. My ex-husband and I had a great divorce. Even though he cheated on me after 12 years and 2 kids under 4, I really wanted to do things differently than my parents did during their divorce. I never said anything negative about him, and tried very hard to defend him when the kids got upset with him. I extended invitations to the woman he left me for, so she would not feel uncomfortable with me, and we became friends. She was basically their stepmom, so why not include her on everything? On holidays, we all had one big dinner, he and her and me and my boyfriend. This made everyone comfortable, and the kids never had to choose one side or the other, as we were all on the same page. It was such a great relationship that when I had back surgery, I recovered at his house and she cooked for me. He and I were coaches for the kids' basketball and baseball teams, and I helped at their wedding 13 years later. This was not easy for me, as he moved to another state to raise her children, leaving me to raise ours on my own. She quit her job when they got together, and I had to return to work to support my kids. But I needed to keep the resentment and bitterness away from my kids. All of this sets the tone for the divorce. But when he initially left, I spoke to a lawyer and got a separation agreement that was really great for me. He asked that I not take half of his retirement, but instead he would pay X in child support and additional Y in alimony, because he was making a lot of money and I was a stay-at-home mom with a country club membership. Yuck. I hated saying that, but it was only to set the scene. Normally, alimony ends after 5 years, but because I didn't get half of the 401k, the only condition of it ending was that it would end on my remarriage or my death. He agreed to all of it. The thing is, when he left me to move down to where she lived, he left his cushy job and took this promising, but not delivering, position that really screwed him financially. But he never went back to the lawyer to get child support or alimony reduced. Instead, he borrowed from his mother. When I discovered he was mooching off of her, I suggested to her that she stop paying for him when he finally got back on his feet. She would never do that and continued paying for his life and her to be a stay-at-home mom, even co-signing for a second home for him when he finally moved back to raise his kids. Hers had graduated and lived in his old house, ours were in high school. He did come to me and ask if I would accept regular child support and half the alimony, and later, when he was really earning money, he would pick back up on the past due amount. Not wanting to make waves in an otherwise great divorce, I said yes, and kept track each month in a shared spreadsheet with him, so he could see how far in debt he was getting each month. He ended up owing me $1,000 a month over 10 years, but he said when the kids aged out of child support, he would continue to pay the same amount to make up for the alimony, which totaled $120,000. When my daughter aged out, he continued to pay the same amount, putting a small dent in what he owed for 3 years. Then, as soon as my son aged out, I mean 2 weeks after he joined the Marines, He called me and told me there was no way he was going to continue paying me for the next X years, and that I could take him to court if I wanted, but there was no fucking way he would pay me another cent. This completely blew my mind, as we had such a fantastic relationship, and it came out of nowhere. I was completely freaked out, but I took his advice. I contacted an attorney. I sent all his calls to voicemail, as per my attorney's advice, and I took him to court. The best thing was, prior to the hearing, my attorney put a lien on both homes he had, so he could not change ownership to his mom or wife prior to the court hearing. I still have the phone call recording when he realized this, and the horrible names he called me for doing that. Since I had kept such immaculate records from that day he changed payments, he was aware of his debt rising each month. It was a slam dunk for my attorney. Instead of making small payments for a few years, he had 30 days to pay me $120,000 in full. Unfortunately, the kids now have to choose which parent they visit on holidays, but that was not my fault. I was willing to continue as is and not put any strain on the family relationship. And for those wondering, yes, he did cheat on her 2 times before they got married, but she had quit her job when they got together because she found a sugar daddy and had nothing to fall back on and nowhere to go, so she stayed with him. Since we were friends, she shared this info with me, as I would understand what she was going through. I think the reason he went crazy on me was his mother refused to pay any more when my son aged out. But I explained that he owed a shit ton in back pay. That's when he said, "If you think I'm making payments to you forever, you're fucking nuts." She had been paying his child support for 10 years because he never went back to a great paying job, even though he could have. Yes, I went to work after separation and have a great career, but my income was still 1/4 of his when we were together, because we moved every 3 years for his career. He wanted me to stay at home when the kids were born. Just to clear up for anyone who may be a little confused, I could not contribute to my retirement fund because I didn't have earned income, meaning no SS, 401k, or IRA. So he maxed out his contributions so we could live comfortably in retirement. After 10 years of marriage, I was legally entitled to half of his retirement. Since he asked me to not take half of his retirement, he offered alimony instead. Then he decided not to pay what he offered and leave me with less retirement funds than I would have had in either case. So my or half of his retirement. This is why it was important for me to get what was due. Not to live a cushy life, but for my retirement. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 126. And thank you very much to everyone who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do share it around with all your friends and family. Likes and comments are also appreciated. Okay, I have a little shout out to give to the author of story number 4. I'm also going to include a link in the description, and if you go along and have a look at their channel, the channel is called Jane in Spain, and you will see beyond all doubt that yes, indeed, they can sing. You should put any doubts anyone had at whether or not they were actually that good. Yes, they were. Indeed, they were. So click on over in the link next to story number 4, and if you like what you hear, by all means subscribe. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.